Hey everyone, today I'm going to talk about setting up Neovim for TypeScript development. This is going to be the first video in a short series on setting this up. Today we're going to be talking about Conquer of Completion, which is a Neovim plugin that gives you VS Code like auto-completion and navigation inside of Vim and Neovim. It works for Vim as well, but we're going to be setting up with Neovim. I'm going to start off with a completely blank configuration file so you can follow along and change things as you like. First thing I'm going to be doing though is installing this Oceanic Next theme because I don't want to deal with the basic weird looking theme. Let's go ahead and make sure you have this NVim directory created if you don't have it already in your home config directory. And then we're going to be editing init.vim. This is for Neovim. If you're following along with Vim, this is going to be our vimrc file. Once we're in here, you're going to want to be setting up a plugin manager for Vim. So this is going to be something like Vim plug or Vundle or whatever you're using. So for me, I already have something pre-installed. Let's go ahead and look up Vim plug, and you can check out their GitHub page and it'll show you a tutorial on how this should be configured, whether you're on Vim or Neovim. Zoom in here so you can see a little bit better. And I encourage everyone to go through and read this slowly, find out what you actually are supposed to be doing. I've already been messing around with this, so I'm kind of familiar with what should be happening. If you want, you can copy this example in. They have some example plugins that are pretty popular that you can go and use. Basically, we're going to want to be calling this plugin begin. And if you're using Vim, it's going to be this Vim plug directory, but we're going to be using this up here, which is specifically for Neovim. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're going to copy this as well. And that's going to be substituting what is in the parentheses. So let's go ahead and paste this. And then here is where you're going to be calling your plugins to be installed. So first, we're going to be doing this Oceanic Next theme. So we can go ahead and just copy this and we're going to paste it right on in here, and that's going to install it. We also need to call one more thing for the plugin manager to kind of close off the plugin installations. So let's go ahead and paste this in here. We can source this file and then call plug install, and it is going to install this plugin. I mean, it's saying it's already installed. And then this isn't going to set it up to use this theme yet. You're going to have to activate a couple different things. So here, if you have like an older version of Vim, you're going to want to set this up. And if you're Vim 8 or using Neovim, you're going to want to use set terms UI colors. I know what I'm using, so I'm just going to copy these in. So it's going to be a little bit more minimal and not having all that cruft. So we go ahead, paste this in here. You could just source it, or you can quit and come back and reopen Vim again. Now we're in an actual nice looking editor. So I just want to get that out of the way in the beginning so we're not looking at an eyesore for this entire series. And we're also done with Vim plug. So we're going to close that. So first we're going to install COC. Again, go through and read this, figure out what you want specifically. This is the recommended way to install this. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Again, this has to be in between these two plug calls, plug begin and plug end. So let's go ahead and pop this in here. Again, let's source this file, and you can call plug install. It's going to go ahead and install that. I already have it installed, so it's going to go by rather quickly. And so we're pretty much set up to start using these COC plugins. The one that we're going to be using for TypeScript is TS server. So you can install it with a little command here, or later in the video, I'll show you how to just write it in your init.vim so you don't have to do this manually. But right now we're going to go ahead and call this. So COC install COC-TS server. And it'll show you a little prompt at the bottom once it's finished. And there it is. So install extension COC-TS server. So now we have the power of VS Code's TypeScript analysis inside of Neovim, but we don't have any key bindings set up or any shortcuts for using that. So let's go ahead and check out the example configuration inside COC. You can actually just go ahead and copy this as pretty sane defaults, and it's set up to where other plugins are allowed to sort of override these. So it shouldn't interfere with anything you have set up. For our example, we have a completely blank configuration file, so it's not going to affect anything. So let's go down here and let's give it a comment saying this is for COC, and let's paste all of that. Looks like a lot, but we're going to go over not all of it, but some of what these do, especially the key bindings. So that's all said and done. Let's go ahead and create an example repository to play a TypeScript. And I have one created here. I'm just going to delete the index file. The tsconfig is really bare. You can copy this if you want, or if you have your own because you've already developed in TypeScript, go ahead and copy that over, whatever you'd like to do. So we are going to start editing our first TypeScript file and start seeing the power of COC. Also, if you would like to have line numbers, I don't really care, but you could just call set number. You can also do this in your vimrc or your init.vim to get your line numbers exposed on the left-hand side. So let's go ahead and do a couple things. Let's call let foo, let's call it a string, is equal to 5, and you'll notice 5 is not a string. So if we highlight over this, we're going to get an error from the TypeScript server saying 5 is not assignable to type string. Again, this is just a type of code analysis that you're going to get from this plugin. So let's go ahead and change this to be a string. And if you, let's create a little function. Let's just call it log, and it's going to take in, let's just say it's going to take in a string. This is a void, and all it's going to do is call console.log. Also, you're getting all of this auto-completion for free. It's even showing what the methods are over here and what they do. So you can go ahead here, press enter, and it's going to autofill those parentheses and put your cursor right in the middle of it. So here we can just type in str and then be done with that. A little formatting. So something cool about this is when we get our autocompletion, you can press Control Space to get autocompletion. I'll go over the key bindings a little bit more. Press tab to come down. It's going to show you the function signature. So you go ahead and press enter, and it's going to autofill whatever that is. So we can go ahead and type in foo here, and everything looks good. If you want, you could run this with a TS node or whatever, and it's going to print out 5 at the bottom. This is the output of executing this file with TS node. And if you have some sort of JS doc built in, you're also going to get autocompletion for that. And let's just say logs a string. So if we go back up here to log and press CapitalK, it's going to show you this function signature with the documentation, which is really useful. And of course, this is also going to work for third-party libraries that you have in your node modules, as long as you have the typings installed. This works for other files and all of that. So that's pretty much the basic features of what this can do. Let's go ahead really quick and look at some of these key bindings that have been set up. And we can go through some of these briefly. Setting the sign column is the left-hand side. So if you have errors like we saw before where it said 5 isn't a string, it's going to show some like red lines or a red icon on the left-hand side saying, hey, there's an error on this line. So this just makes it to where that's always there, or else all your lines are going to be shifting one character to the left and right as they come and go. This is just setting up tab completion, so you can press tab and go through the different results in the pop-up menu. And you can navigate to these different, they're called like diagnostics. When you have errors or warnings, you can press the square brackets left or right to go forward or backward, and then G, and it's going to automatically hop exactly to where that error is or where that warning is. And that little pop-up menu with the warning or error with the definition is going to show up on your cursor. Going to code navigation is a good one. Starting with G, I usually use GD for everything. So say you're on some sort of function and you want to see where this is declared, or same thing for the variable. You just have to put your cursor on it and press GD, and your cursor is automatically going to hop to where that is. And another one that I use very often is this references GR. So if you find the declaration for a variable and you want to know where it's being referenced, you can press GR and it's going to show you all the places where that occurs. I'll actually go ahead and show you that. Let's go ahead and edit this again. And I'm just going to copy and paste this line a couple times. I'll even put one like down here. So say I want to know where this foo variable is referenced. I can just press GR. And this shows all the references. And you could use J and K to scroll through this little menu on the very bottom down here. And this is saying the line in the column of where it is. So you see this very last one's line 16 and whatnot. And it automatically shows you this little middle section. It shows you the surrounding area of the code and highlights that variable. And then if you actually like go down here and press enter, it's going to jump your cursor down to where that is. And going for the definition, you do the same thing. Go over foo, press GD. It's going to go to the declaration for that variable. And the same thing also happens for log. So if I press GD on log, it's going to hop to that function definition. This also works in between files using node modules and things like that. So you're never wondering where things are in your code. All right, let's go back and check out a couple more of these bindings that are pre-declared. So here are all of those go-to navigations that we just looked at. This one is CapitalK, which I mentioned before, which is going to show you the code documentation and function signatures and all of that if you hover over a keyword and press Shift K or capital K. This is the function that does that. Show documentation. You can rename symbols. Let me just pull this up actually, so we can see this sort of in action. So here in symbol renaming, let's say we have this other variable named bar, and we want to rename it to something else. So we want to rename the first one to foobar. So what you can do is press leader RN. So by default, that is the backslash. So leader RN, and you're going to get this little prompt on the bottom here. It's kind of subtle. So it pulls up the original variable name. So you can change that or modify it. I'm going to change it to foobar, and you press enter. It's automatically going to rename that variable. Same for functions, wherever it occurs. This usually doesn't happen across files unless you have them open in multiple buffers from what I found. So yeah, it's usually best to double check that stuff, but it does it for the entire open buffer. And there is code formatting. If you select something and you press leader F, it does automatic code formatting, which is pretty nice. And there are also these default code actions. I don't think I'll have anything here specifically to show. Maybe I'll show this in the next video. But if you have, let's say, a missing import, the code is going to say, I don't know what this class name is, or, what is this? You can press leader AC and it's going to give you a list of code actions that you can select from with numbers. Or if you wanted to just do the first code action, you could do leader QF, which are both defined here. And that's going to automatically, usually for imports, it'll just do that automatically, which is really useful. It also works really well if you have something set up like ESLint or Prettier, and it's saying here's some sort of error coming from those sources, you can automatically format your code to use, say, double quotes instead of single quotes, things like that. All right, so you also have these text objects. So IF stands for inside function and AF stands for around function. So you could do something neat like this. You do CIF to change in function, so that changed everything within the function itself. So let's say I had like multiple lines, I could CIF and it's going to delete all that, and now I'm in insert mode. And then if you are to use AF, you could use CAF for change around function. That's going to be removing all of it, CAF. So this just creates it as a text object, so it's easier to manipulate that stuff. There also is, when you're in normal mode, you can press tab and it uses that that function text object to edit it as well. So I'm in here in the middle of the function, I'm going to press tab. It is going to be selecting the range sort of like inside of this function. And then these are the other commands like formatting, creating folds, stuff like that. So you could do, fold, or you could use the built-in key bindings. So if you use ZC, it's going to collapse something, and if you use ZO, it's going to reopen it. A lot of people create their own key bindings for this, but it's pretty intuitive. The last thing, you can customize your status line with information from COC, and I'll probably set up like airline or something else later on in the video series. This last little section is just some default key bindings for COC in general. So if you have an error, let's say, let's change this 5 back to not a string, and let's say this is a number. So we have 3 errors here. And of course, you can hop around, like we said previously, with the square brackets in G to go forward and backward through these errors and see what they are. But if you hit space and A, it's going to pull up a list of the diagnostics. So let's do that, space A, and you can see them down here on the bottom. And you can navigate this with arrow keys or Control JK. And you have a fuzzy finder for these errors. So say you're looking for something that has to do with number not being correct. You can type in number and it's going to filter these out. Really helpful when you're refactoring and have a lot of errors, or finding something like very specific. Let's go ahead and fix this. You could also manage your extensions with COC. If you press space E, your extensions that are loaded will pop up here. Of course, we only have one right now. It is COC TS server. We'll be adding more later. You can come through here and select them and deactivate them, stuff like that from this menu. Space C is going to be showing all the commands that you can execute. So some of these are specific to the workspace or the extensions. TS server supplies a few, like reloading your projects or restarting it if it's starting to act weird or something strange happens. Watch build, executing auto fixes, organizing imports, things like that. Pretty useful if you don't know what they are built in and you want to just press space C and just type in, hey, what can I do right now with this? Space O is going to show you all the symbols of the current document. So this shows you variable names and functions. It's kind of similar to other Vim plugins, but it's not like super customizable as far as I know. There's a really popular one that actually supports using COC. I'll probably go over that later as well. So you can get a kind of a nice overview of your current buffers or project in like a sidebar. Searching the workspace symbols is kind of the same thing, except you type in whatever and it's going to pop up, which is really useful for searching based off of terms rather than on text or trying to find what file something is in. And then of course default actions are space J, space K, which is when you have like code actions and things to execute. And then if you want to resume the latest list, space P is going to pop up. So I believe this is the same as I have before, which is searching workspace symbols. So that is pretty much it for this tutorial. I hope it helped people set it up. I'm going to go through in the next video talking about configuring ESLint, getting some better formatting with instead of using 8 space tabs, we're going to use actual spaces with an indent of 2 spaces, things like that. and configuring this to be more and more like an IDE, but of course with all of the nice navigation that you get from using Vim or Neovim. So that's going to wrap it up for now, and I hope to see you in the next one.